This is your OddsShark Week 12 NFL preview for the Westgate SuperContest. I'm Todd Furman out here in Las Vegas, joined by the man back outside of Philadelphia, Jason McIntyre, he of big lead fame. Jason, how's this season been going for you so far?
Started off terribly, Todd. I was trailing you big time at the beginning. Took me about 7 or 8 weeks to catch up, and I'm holding on to glory right now in the lead, but it's not going to last long.
It has definitely been a role reversal. My 14-1 start feels like a distant memory as I can't seem to get out of my own way, much like a couple of these teams we'll discuss. But let's start up at TFC Bank Stadium, where Green Bay is listed as a 9.5-point favorite this week on the contest line. We hear all the time how dangerous it is to lay nearly double digits in the NFL, especially on road in a divisional game. What are your initial thoughts on Minnesota potentially as a live home dog, or maybe laying the lumber here with Green Bay?
I would have liked to have seen 10, Todd. I think 9.5, kind of a little disappointing. The big thing I look at is the Vikings have played great at home against bad teams, Washington, Atlanta. And then you look how they played against Detroit. You go back to that game. Not a good performance. I'm leery to go with them here. They also got smoked at home by New England. It's just a tough one for me to take Minnesota, although it's a perfect spot. Packers possibly looking ahead, right, to next week. And the Packers are at its highest value as possible. You got to assume, Todd, everybody's going to take them, right?
Yeah, you make great points talking about Green Bay, and right now this is a team that you're going to look for opportunities to go against, knowing that odds makers have caught up to them. A slightly different football team, obviously, when they play at Lambeau versus when they go out on the road. Dominating effort against Philadelphia last week. And another angle you can look to use here potentially with the Vikings, huge revenge from a game where they were absolutely embarrassed on Thursday night early this year. Of course, Christian Ponder got the start. My only fear here is that Teddy Bridgewater seems to be in a little bit over his head. Didn't really put together a great effort against Chicago, but at the same time, Minnesota, they did add Ben Tate to get another talented running back there. Maybe look to run the football and rely on that defense to get you the cover here.
That's a good point, Todd, about revenge. This feels like a revenge weekend in the NFL, right? Jets, Bills, Colts, Jaguars, kind of a lot of even you could go to Cade McNown going back at Chicago. They didn't want to sign him in the offseason, and now he's in Tampa. I like the revenge factor. It's worked at times. I don't love to use it as one of my higher up on the ladder when you're looking at reasons to take a team. But I'll probably end up shying away from Minnesota, and then regret it probably midway through the third quarter.
It's one of those games that makes it real tough, either a feast or famine type approach. You can see the Vikings keeping it close, but it wouldn't surprise anybody if they lost the game by 2 touchdowns plus. And another big game, albeit not a divisional showdown, as Detroit goes on the road to take on New England. The Patriots at an all-time high as well. You're looking at them as a 7-point favorite, fresh off that dominating win against Indy. Of course, with the Lions, that stops and starts with that defensive line being able to put pressure on the quarterback. And that's what it's going to take if they're going to be able to cover here. What are your initial thoughts on this particular game, Jason?
We've seen the Patriots let down at home, Todd. That they didn't cover against the Raiders in a real bad performance. But they're clicking right now. And, I don't want to buy into the Jonas Gray hype. I didn't pick him up in fantasy football because you can see Tom Brady going, 35 of 40 for 395, and Jonas Gray gets 7 carries. That I can totally see that happening just because Belichick, you never know. I know the sharps and the numbers guys like Detroit. They've liked them all season. I haven't. I watched this team, and I think they are just barely getting by. I think the Nick Fairley loss defensively has hurt them. I struggle to watch them move the football. A couple weeks ago, they dominated Miami. I'm sure you remember that game.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, at the end of the game, they need some lucky stop and then a touchdown pass in the final minute to pull out the win and cover. I just don't like Detroit at all, but like you said, it's laying 7 at home. That's a lot. I'll probably stay away from this one, but I just don't like the Lions at all on the road. I'm sure you've seen the Matt Stafford is winless against teams with a winning record in the last couple of years or whatever it is, something like that.
Yeah, it's definitely a compelling angle to look because the line clearly is inflated here. You're getting all sorts of value at Detroit, but you're talking about numbers that essentially don't meet what we've seen from a perception standpoint in this Lions team, who you're exactly right, have struggled to move the football consistently on the road under Matt Stafford. You look at all those weapons and wonder how they're only able to muster 6 points last week in the desert. Sledding won't be that much easier in New England, especially if there is potential weather in the forecast.
Yeah. How about this, Todd? For all the hype about Calvin Johnson, he struggled last week against Peterson. And he's going against Revis this week, who's even better. So you're asking Golden Tate to carry this team offensively? I mean, I don't even know if Reggie Bush is back. I just don't like Detroit at all. But, again, this is one of those spots. 7's a lot. You get a garbage touchdown from Stafford for a 30-24 final, and you're just, you're just hating life after picking the Patriots. So it's a tough weekend with a lot of home favorites.
Yeah, it definitely wouldn't surprise me if Detroit was able to keep this game close. But again, I'll look more towards their Thanksgiving showdown as a chance to potentially back them than I will on the highway. And a game all of a sudden on Monday night that takes on huge importance not only for Super Contest contestants, but also in the playoff picture for the NFC. The New Orleans Saints, back-to-back home losses. You've seen some money coming on the dog Super Contest line here, though. Still New Orleans -3.5 as they play host to Baltimore. We know how good John Harbaugh's teams are out of a bye. But this really amounts to a do-or-die type football performance for the Saints, something very similar to what we saw a few weeks ago in prime time, where they were able to beat Green Bay pretty handily as very short home favorites.
Yeah, you remember I think it was 2 weeks ago, everybody was saying, New Orleans at home under Sean Payton, they've covered like 20 games or some absurd stat. And then the 49ers beat them. I had the Niners that weekend. But like an idiot, I backed the Saints against the Bengals at home last weekend. Such a stupid move. You could tell from the first drive that game was over. They just couldn't get a stop, can't get off the field. Andy Dalton's out there looking like Montana. I was so frustrated. However, night game, Todd, totally different from that 1 p.m. start. The night game, we've seen. Here's one interesting thing. I would love to see some numbers on teams coming off a bye this season. Because does it feel like a lot of teams have been laying an egg coming off the bye? Just kind of a little bit of a letdown?
Definitely. I mean, and when you go all the way back to 2011, it hasn't been a great trend. Teams barely 500 coming off of a bye week. And I think what that's a byproduct of is the CBA. Knowing how important this game is to New Orleans, I actually think you're maybe getting a little bit of a discount. Respect the sharp money that's come in on the dog in this spot. I don't think home field advantage is reflected nearly as strong as it needs to be when you're talking about roughly a 5.5 to 6 point spot, as you allude to, with the Saints playing at home at night. I would definitely agree with you. Love to see 3 here, which we know we won't get in the contest, but think from a betting angle, I'm much more inclined to back the Saints here as a short favorite than I would be the Ravens on the road.
Yeah, I mean, we looked a few weeks ago, Saints night game, beat up on Aaron Rodgers. The stadium's just louder at night. People are more amped. It's the game of the day. It's on TV. I mean, and if you want to buy into Sean Payton losing 2 in a row at home, I mean, it's tough for me to imagine. I know you love the Saints coming into the season, right? Super Bowl.
That doesn't look so good right now as they sit at 4-6. Still an inside track to win the division, but man, oh man, this team has been a far cry from what I expected. That's for sure.
And they lost Cooks, I believe, again this week for the season. He was a nice weapon. Jimmy Graham. I have him on my fantasy team. I've been a little disappointed in the production, but mostly it's the defense. They just don't know. You don't know when they're going to show up. I probably avoid it, but I would actually take the Saints over the Ravens here, despite the sharp money, like you said, coming in on Baltimore.
It should be a very interesting weekend, and Jason, you now have that target on your back as I look to try and rebound over the next 6 weeks of the season. Wish you nothing but luck as we try and wrap up on a high note. Of course, NFL Week 12, you can get everything at OddsShark, great trends, line moves, everything to make you more successful, whether you're a Super Contest contestant or not, or just looking to bet recreationally. Jason, have a great weekend, and we'll chat again next week.
All right, Todd, take it easy.